The sun rose over the vast plains of ancient Persia, casting its golden light across the heart of an empire that would one day stretch from the borders of the Indus to the shores of the Aegean. In this land of immense wealth and ambition, a singular force emerged, an elite brotherhood of warriors known not just for their skill, but for their unbroken presence on the battlefield. They were called the Immortals, not merely as a name but as a testament to their unyielding loyalty, discipline, and relentless power. The moniker itself carried an almost mythical weight, suggesting a force so constant that death could never claim them, for any fallen warrior was immediately replaced, maintaining a perfect strength of 10,000 at all times. To the enemies of Persia they were terrifying. To the kings of Persia, they were the backbone of imperial might. Long before the famous campaigns of Xerxes and Darius, the Immortals were forged in the crucible of necessity. Persia, a land of countless tribes, cultures, and languages, required an army that could unify this diversity under a single iron command. Ordinary soldiers could not be trusted to enforce the will of the king across such a sprawling domain. The Immortals were more than soldiers. They were symbols of the empire's cohesion, an embodiment of discipline and order that mirrored the authority of the throne itself. They were meticulously trained, drilled in formations that turned them into an almost supernatural wall of force on the battlefield. Archers, spearmen, cavalry auxiliaries, and close combat fighters moved as one organism, their synchronization a testament to the precision of Persian military doctrine. To witness them in formation was to witness not merely an army, but a living, breathing extension of imperial power. Their weapons were an extension of themselves, honed with care and maintained with the reverence of sacred artifacts. Each Immortal bore a wicker shield and a short spear, a bow slung across the back, and a dagger ready at the hip. Some carried long swords or battle axes, but every choice was deliberate, dictated by a philosophy that prized versatility, readiness, and the ability to strike with decisive efficiency. Even in the chaos of war, the Immortals were a constant presence, disciplined, unflinching, and terrifyingly effective. It was said that an army could face them for hours, even days, and still feel the steady pulse of 10,000 hearts beating in unison. That rhythm, that cohesion, was the essence of their power, and it was a power that intimidated more than any weapon. The origins of the Immortals were as strategic as they were symbolic. Darius the Great, whose vision for the empire was both expansive and meticulously organized, recognized the need for a permanent, elite force to secure his reign and enforce his vision. He did not merely recruit men, he selected the finest soldiers from across the empire, men of exceptional ability, loyalty, and composure. Every Immortal was a warrior who had already proven his mettle, yet each was tested further, trained to withstand fear, exhaustion, and the chaos of battle. Their existence was not merely about fighting, it was about embodying an ideal, an image of an unbroken and eternal Persian state. To the common soldier they were awe-inspiring. To the enemy, they were a nightmare that could not be negotiated with or reasoned against. Even beyond their battlefield prowess, the Immortals served as the king's personal guard, ensuring the safety of Persia's rulers during campaigns and in the imperial courts. Their loyalty was absolute, and it was enforced through a combination of honor, elite status, and the subtle, unyielding presence of the king's will. To fall in battle was not failure. It was a call to immediate replacement, ensuring that the unit's name, its reputation, and its terrifying perfection endured. This continuity gave the Persian kings a confidence that no other military unit could provide, a certainty that wherever the empire extended, there stood a force ready to strike with precision, unbroken, and unshakable. The psychological impact of the Immortals cannot be overstated. To face them was to confront an entity that seemed impervious to fear, exhaustion, and death. They moved with disciplined coordination, their shields locked, their spears thrusting in unison, their arrows raining like a storm from the sky. Ancient historians noted how armies would falter at the sight of their approach, how morale shattered as quickly as formations in front of them. In battle, the Immortals were not just participants, they were instruments of intimidation, their presence shaping the very outcome of campaigns before a single blow was struck. It was not only their skill that made them extraordinary, it was the aura they carried, a sense that the Persian Empire itself marched forward with them at its tip. Yet, despite their seeming invincibility, the Immortals were human. They felt exhaustion, hunger, and fear, but they were trained to master these forces, to channel them into a relentless rhythm of action. Their training was rigorous, blending physical conditioning with tactical education, ensuring that each warrior could adapt to the unpredictable chaos of combat. Discipline was ingrained not through punishment alone, but through culture, ceremony, and a deep sense of belonging to a unit larger than oneself. They were the ultimate combination of skill, endurance, and psychological resilience, a template for what a warrior could become when personal ambition was subordinated to collective perfection. As the Persian Empire expanded, the Immortals became the face of its military might. They were present in the deserts of Egypt, the mountains of Anatolia, and the plains of Mesopotamia, wherever the empire's power needed to be asserted. Their fame spread not only through their actions, but through the legends that followed them, tales told by allies and enemies alike. They were immortal, not because they could not die, but because their legacy was indelible, etched into the memory of every battle they influenced. Empires rose and fell, generals came and went, yet the image of 10,000 immortals advancing in perfect formation remained, a symbol of enduring strength and relentless ambition. The Immortals' influence extended beyond the battlefield into the very structure of Persian society. They were a living statement of the empire's ideals: loyalty, discipline, and unity. They represented the potential of humans pushed to their utmost limits, refined into instruments of statecraft and warfare. Kings could trust them with impossible tasks, generals could rely on them to hold critical positions, and entire armies measured themselves against their standard. In a sense, they were the embodiment of Persia itself, immense, unyielding, and seemingly eternal, a force that shaped not only wars but the very psyche of a civilization. As Persia's borders expanded, the Immortals were called upon not merely to fight, but to define the very strategy of empire. Each campaign was a test of their adaptability, a challenge to their discipline, and an opportunity to demonstrate why they were the ultimate warriors. When the empire turned its eyes westward toward the Greek city-states, it was the Immortals who would carry the weight of conquest. Their presence in these campaigns was both practical and psychological. Their march signaled the inevitability of Persian power, a shadow cast across the lands they sought to subdue. Ancient accounts tell of Greek spies and scouts observing them, noting their uniformity, their unbroken formation, and the almost hypnotic rhythm of their advance. Each soldier was a cog in a vast machine, and the machine itself moved with terrifying precision, as if guided by the hand of destiny. The march of the Immortals was a spectacle in itself. They traveled with such coordination that even logistical movements became demonstrations of power. Tents were raised, supplies distributed, and signals conveyed with almost ritualistic timing. Each Immortal knew his place, not only on the battlefield but within the broader choreography of the campaign. Orders flowed down a chain of command that valued clarity and speed, and yet the soldiers themselves were empowered by rigorous training to act decisively when the chaos of combat demanded it. They were the embodiment of the Persian philosophy of order, disciplined, flexible, and unyielding, able to respond to the unexpected without fracturing the cohesion of the unit. The Immortals' training was relentless, beginning with selection and continuing through campaigns. Each warrior was required to master multiple weapons, from the long spear to the bow, from the sword to the dagger, becoming a versatile threat in any situation. Physical endurance was paramount. They ran, swam, and marched for hours under the harshest conditions, learning to move as if fatigue were an impossibility. But strength alone was insufficient. Mental conditioning was equally rigorous. They were trained to remain calm in the face of carnage, to interpret signals amidst chaos, and to strike with unerring precision even when surrounded. The Immortals were taught that fear and doubt were weaknesses to be suppressed, replaced with an unwavering focus on duty, honor, and survival as part of a greater whole. It was this combination of physical mastery and psychological resilience that made the Immortals so feared. In battle, their movements resembled the tide, unstoppable, fluid, and relentless. Enemy lines often crumbled not because the Immortals were stronger individually, but because they were unshakably cohesive. While ordinary soldiers fought for survival, the Immortals fought for the continuation of a legacy, for the embodiment of an empire. Every thrust of the spear, every volley of arrows, and every shield wall reinforced the impression of immortality, a force so perfectly orchestrated that it seemed impossible to resist. This cohesion was not accidental. It was the product of a culture that prized collective strength over individual glory, a philosophy that became a defining characteristic of Persian military doctrine. Yet even within this discipline, there was room for innovation and cunning. The Immortals were not merely a blunt instrument, they were tacticians in their own right. They executed flanking maneuvers, feigned retreats and ambushes, using intelligence and observation as much as brute force. Persian generals relied on their elite unit not only to hold the line, but to turn the tide of battle, deploying them at decisive moments to exploit enemy weaknesses. Their presence could lift morale across the army and demoralize foes long before engagement. This strategic flexibility made them more than warriors. It made them instruments of statecraft, capable of shaping both war and politics with a single decisive strike. The Immortals were also masters of symbolism. Their very appearance conveyed power. Dressed in ornate uniforms, adorned with jewelry and ceremonial weapons, they projected an image of wealth, authority, and perfection. The uniformity of their appearance, combined with their disciplined movement, amplified their psychological impact. Observers described the effect as awe-inspiring and terrifying, a living representation of Persia itself, disciplined, cohesive, and unstoppable. Each warrior, while formidable individually, became part of a larger spectacle, a demonstration that the empire was not just a political entity, but a force of destiny, embodied in the flesh and blood of its most elite soldiers. Their reputation was such that legends quickly grew around them, tales of Immortals striking down hundreds in a single engagement, holding entire fronts with unyielding discipline, or executing maneuvers that seemed impossible to ordinary men circulated across the empire and beyond. Some stories, perhaps exaggerated with time, only enhanced their mythos, cementing their place in history not just as elite soldiers, but as symbols of an empire that refused to be conquered. Even enemies respected, or feared, the Immortals, understanding that to face them was to confront the essence of Persian military might. These narratives created an aura that transcended the battlefield, ensuring that the name Immortals would endure long after individual warriors had fallen. Beyond the battlefield, the Immortals' influence extended into Persian politics and culture. They were a constant presence in the courts of kings, serving as protectors and enforcers of imperial authority. Their loyalty was both practical and symbolic. They represented the unbroken will of the monarchy, a living guarantee that the king's power was absolute. This intertwining of military excellence and political symbolism reinforced their elite status. To be an Immortal was not merely to serve in war, it was to become a living emblem of Persia itself, carrying the weight of history, honor, and expectation on one's shoulders. Their existence elevated the status of the military within society, demonstrating that excellence, discipline, and loyalty could elevate ordinary men to almost mythical stature. The campaigns of the Immortals reached their zenith during the great confrontations with the Greeks. At Thermopylae, they faced an alliance of city-states that would become the stuff of legend. Though history would remember the Greeks' valiant stand, it also preserved the fearsome reputation of the Immortals. They advanced with relentless precision, their formation unbroken even as the terrain and enemy tactics sought to challenge them. The Greeks, for all their courage, faced a force that seemed inexhaustible, and the stories of this encounter reinforced the myth that had already begun to surround these elite warriors. The Immortals were not merely participants in history, they were shaping it, imprinting their name and legacy upon the collective memory of both friend and foe. The myth of immortality was, in many ways, self-perpetuating. Replacement was immediate for any fallen warrior, ensuring that their ranks remained unbroken. This practice not only maintained numerical strength, but reinforced psychological dominance. Enemies faced not individuals, but an idea, a force that could not be diminished, that continued to strike with the same precision regardless of casualties. The Immortals' reputation became a tool of war in itself, a psychological weapon as formidable as any spear or arrow. Across the empire, in the halls of kings and the hearts of soldiers, the Immortals were more than a military unit. They were a symbol, a promise of power that could neither falter nor fade. The Immortals' true power was revealed in the crucible of battle, where strategy, discipline, and sheer will fused into a force unlike any other. Persia's campaigns across the ancient world tested them in every imaginable condition: scorching deserts, jagged mountains, and dense forests. Each terrain demanded adaptation, and the Immortals adapted with remarkable precision. When the army approached a city, the Immortals led the vanguard, their presence signaling not only attack but the inevitability of conquest. Their shields locked together in impenetrable walls, their spears thrust with coordinated rhythm, and their arrows rained down in volleys that shattered morale before the enemy could even form ranks. The effectiveness of the Immortals lay not merely in individual skill, but in the orchestration of 10,000 men moving as one, a living instrument of war capable of overwhelming entire armies with terrifying efficiency. During the Persian invasion of Greece, their prowess was on full display. When the Immortals faced the narrow pass of Thermopylae, they confronted not only Greek warriors, but the constraints of geography. Yet even in a choke point, their discipline allowed them to maneuver with order, striking with calculated precision. Ancient accounts describe how their spears advanced like a forest of iron, their shields gleaming in unison, their arrows filling the air like a black storm. The Spartan defenders, famed for their own discipline and courage, recognized the challenge of facing men who moved as one, unflinching and unstoppable. Even as the Greeks held their ground, the Immortals' relentless advance left an impression that would echo through history, a testament to the terrifying efficiency of Persia's elite. Their tactics were multifaceted. While the front lines held firm, specialized units of Immortals executed flanking maneuvers, exploiting weaknesses in enemy formations. Archers targeted key opponents, cavalry units struck from the rear, and reserves were ready to reinforce wherever the battle wavered. Each Immortal understood his role within this choreography. This level of coordination required extraordinary training and trust, a bond forged not in comfort, but in relentless drills and shared hardship. There was no room for hesitation or error. To falter was to endanger not only oneself, but the integrity of the entire unit. And yet the Immortals never faltered. They moved as if guided by a single mind, a testament to the depth of their preparation and the rigor of their discipline. Individual heroics were rare, yet when they occurred, they became legend. Some accounts describe an Immortal who, surrounded by enemy warriors, held his ground for hours, cutting down dozens before being relieved by reinforcements. Others tell of commanders who led daring night assaults, navigating treacherous terrain with uncanny precision, striking fear into towns and armies alike. Each story served a dual purpose. It honored the bravery of the individual and reinforced the myth of the Immortals' invincibility. In battle, every movement was both tactical and symbolic, a living demonstration of Persia's power and the elite nature of its soldiers. Their weapons and armor were as integral to their identity as their discipline. The wicker shield, surprisingly light yet sturdy, allowed them to move quickly without sacrificing defense. Spears were used both for thrusting and for forming protective walls, while bows delivered volleys of arrows that could decimate enemy ranks before melee engagement even began. Daggers and short swords ensured that each warrior could fight effectively in close quarters. The uniformity of their equipment was deliberate, reinforcing cohesion and presenting a visual statement of unity. Enemy soldiers, seeing a line of Immortals advancing with identical weapons and disciplined formation, often faltered before contact, overwhelmed by the sheer perfection of the display. Even outside the chaos of battle, the Immortals maintained the aura of invincibility. Camps were organized with military precision, meals distributed in orderly fashion, and training continued during marches. Rest was measured, not optional, and every action reinforced the culture of readiness. The Immortals were a constant demonstration of the Empire's ideals: loyalty, discipline, and perfection. To serve among them was to be part of something greater than oneself, a philosophy that transformed men into symbols of the Persian state. The psychological impact of the Immortals cannot be overstated. They were as much a weapon of fear as they were of steel. Ancient Greek and Egyptian observers alike marveled at their discipline, noting how 10,000 men moved with a singular purpose, responding to orders as if guided by one mind. To face them was to confront inevitability. Enemy morale often crumbled before combat even began, a testament to the careful cultivation of reputation alongside martial skill. The Immortals' name carried weight across the known world, their presence in any engagement amplifying the perception of Persian dominance. Yet despite their extraordinary reputation, the Immortals were not untouchable. History records campaigns in which they faced setbacks, ambushes, or terrain that tested even their legendary coordination. These challenges only highlighted their adaptability. When confronted with unfamiliar situations, Immortals relied on training, leadership, and unity to restore balance. Their response was never panic, but disciplined adjustment, reflecting an understanding that mastery lay not in avoiding challenges, but in overcoming them through collective skill. Even their enemies came to respect the Immortals, acknowledging the precision, endurance, and cohesion that defined them. Tales circulated of generals who altered entire strategies to avoid direct confrontation with the elite force, redirecting attacks or seeking alternative routes rather than risking engagement. Such deference reinforced the psychological impact of the Immortals, extending their influence far beyond the immediate battlefield. Their reputation became a strategic asset, shaping campaigns before a single sword was drawn. The legacy of the Immortals extended beyond victories or defeats. They influenced military structures across the ancient world, setting a standard for elite units that combined training, discipline, and symbolic authority. Their presence elevated the Persian army, embedding the ideals of loyalty and cohesion into the very fabric of the empire. They became a model for future generations of warriors, a benchmark against which all other elite soldiers would be measured. Their myth persisted long after the fall of the Persian Empire, a reminder that the true power of a warrior lies not just in strength, but in unity, discipline, and the ability to inspire awe. Through every campaign, the Immortals proved that warfare was as much a contest of will and cohesion as it was of numbers or weapons. They moved with purpose, struck with precision, and endured with unwavering resolve. They were more than soldiers. They were living embodiments of the Persian Empire, demonstrating that true mastery arises when skill, discipline, and reputation converge. In every corner of the ancient world, from the deserts of Mesopotamia to the mountains of Anatolia, their name became synonymous with fear, respect, and inevitability. To understand the Immortals is to understand the very essence of Persian military genius, a blend of human excellence and mythic aura that ensured their place in history as ultimate warriors. The Immortals were more than a fighting force. They were a society unto themselves, a microcosm of the Persian Empire that reflected its values, hierarchies, and rituals. Their life began long before the first clash of spears in training grounds and barracks, where discipline was cultivated as rigorously as skill. Each day was governed by routine, a rhythm that ensured that when the moment of battle arrived, hesitation and confusion were impossible. Dawn brought physical drills, running across open fields, lifting weights, sparring with partners, and practicing formations until muscle memory became instinct. This was not mere exercise. It was a forging of bodies into instruments capable of enduring the extremes of war. Strength, stamina, and reflex were essential, but equally crucial was the training of the mind. Mental conditioning was woven into every aspect of an Immortal's life. Warriors were taught to suppress fear, to endure hunger and fatigue, and to make decisions in moments of chaos. They learned the subtleties of strategy, studying historical campaigns and practicing maneuvers repeatedly until they could execute them without hesitation. Leadership within the ranks was cultivated carefully. Commanders emerged not only for their skill in battle, but for their judgment, loyalty, and ability to inspire cohesion. Even ordinary soldiers were trained to think 2 steps ahead, anticipating enemy moves and responding with precision. The Immortals were soldiers who lived in a constant state of readiness, their existence shaped as much by preparation as by action. Hierarchy was strict yet functional. At the top stood the commanders, often selected from the most experienced and capable of the Immortals themselves. Their authority was absolute in matters of strategy and discipline, yet it was grounded in respect earned through skill and courage. Beneath them, lieutenants managed smaller units, ensuring that orders flowed efficiently and that each warrior understood his role in the larger formation. Rank did not merely confer authority, it defined responsibility. Every Immortal was accountable not only for his own actions, but for the cohesion and effectiveness of the unit as a whole. Loyalty was enforced through both tradition and expectation. To fail was not merely a personal flaw, it was a threat to the continuity and perfection of the Immortals, and the culture of accountability ensured that such lapses were rare. Rituals and symbols reinforced this cohesion. Before battle, Immortals performed ceremonies that bound them together as a single entity. Weapons were cleaned and arranged with meticulous care, armor was inspected, and each soldier performed gestures and chants that instilled a sense of unity. These rituals were more than superstition, they were psychological preparation, aligning mind, body, and spirit with the collective purpose of the unit. Even in camp, discipline was maintained. Messes were organized, sentries rotated in precise patterns, and rest was measured, never left to chance. Every action, no matter how small, reinforced the identity of the Immortals as more than individuals. They were a living expression of Persian strength. The Immortals also embodied the Empire's ideals of honor and loyalty. Acts of bravery were recognized, and discipline was harsh but fair, ensuring that each warrior internalized the values necessary to maintain cohesion. Stories of past campaigns were recounted during meals and gatherings, serving as both instruction and inspiration. These narratives emphasized not individual glory, but the triumph of the unit, reinforcing the idea that immortality lay not in surviving, but in maintaining the perfection and continuity of the force. Each soldier understood that he was part of something larger than himself, a living bridge between the present and the enduring legacy of Persia. Yet life among the Immortals was not devoid of humanity. Bonds were formed between soldiers, friendships forged in shared hardship and triumph. They trained together, ate together, and marched together, creating a camaraderie that strengthened cohesion on the battlefield. Humor, storytelling, and small acts of care punctuated the rigor of daily life, providing relief from the relentless demands of discipline. This balance of strictness and humanity was essential. It ensured that the Immortals were not merely machines of war, but individuals committed to each other and to the collective purpose. The selection process for the Immortals reinforced their elite status. Men were drawn from across the Empire, chosen not only for physical prowess but for character, intelligence, and temperament. Potential recruits underwent rigorous testing, both in combat and in endurance, to ensure that only the most capable and reliable became part of the unit. Even after selection, continuous assessment ensured that standards were maintained. A warrior's skill was never assumed. It was proven daily in drills, maneuvers, and when the time came on the battlefield. This relentless pursuit of excellence created a culture in which mediocrity was impossible, and the reputation of the Immortals as unmatched warriors was not mere legend but a reflection of reality. Rituals of mourning and remembrance also played a vital role. When an Immortal fell, he was honored not only as an individual, but as a symbol of continuity. Replacement was immediate, maintaining the unbroken number of 10,000, yet the fallen warrior's memory was preserved through ceremony and storytelling. This practice reinforced the dual nature of the Immortals. They were mortal men, yet their unit was eternal. Every death, every replacement, every ceremony strengthened the idea that the Immortals existed beyond the limitations of individual life, a living testament to the Empire's enduring power. Even in leisure, their lives reflected discipline and purpose. Recreation was structured to maintain physical fitness, sharpen reflexes, or cultivate strategy. Archery competitions, mock battles, and tactical exercises were common forms of diversion, ensuring that even moments of rest contributed to the readiness and cohesion of the unit. Knowledge of terrain, tactics, and weaponry was shared and debated, creating a culture of continuous learning and improvement. In this way, the Immortals were not static. They evolved, adapted, and perfected their craft, maintaining an edge that kept them unmatched in the known world. The daily life of the Immortals, with its balance of rigor, ritual, and camaraderie, was a crucible in which ordinary men were transformed into elite warriors. Each day reinforced the qualities that made them feared, respected, and ultimately immortal in name, if not in flesh. Their cohesion, discipline, and adaptability allowed them to confront challenges that would have overwhelmed lesser soldiers, and their presence became a symbol of Persian authority and power. To live as an immortal was to dedicate oneself entirely to the perfection of the unit, to the will of the king, and to the enduring legacy of one of history's greatest empires.